So Spencer came out in 2021. We missed it. It was directed by Pablo Larraín and written by Stephen Knight. He's the creator and sole writer of Peaky Blinders.
Which is an amazing show.
Yes, which I will talk about later.
Oh, okay,
This
cool.
is a drama. It is a biopic. It's also billed as a fable based on a true tragedy.
Yes, which I love. I loved that line. I thought that was beautiful.
And I think you could absolutely argue it's a horror movie, too. So
100%.
I wanted to...
I have so much to say about that. And
Yeah.
that's not just us being like, it's all horror, because we love horror. This movie was... I would call it a thriller with elements of horror.
So if you, like me, didn't know anything about Princess Diana and you're not really sure why we would do an episode on it or why you should care, I wrote up a little pitch just to explain why this thing appealed to me so much. And I was trying to break it down like a recipe and figure out the ingredients of things I like that are in here.
Right.
So this movie has the royal intrigue and criticism of The Crown, Versailles, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
It has the unnerving, cold surrealism of The Shining. And I don't mean, oh, it's like The Shining because they have the carpet pattern. It's actually like The Shining.
I have so much to talk about with The Shining.
It captures that spirit and eeriness. And it's also an unblinking, harrowing character portrait with a perfect musical score. Very much like The Joker.
Yeah, we were about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and Cam just said, "This is just Joker for girls."
Exactly.
I was like, "That's exactly what this is."
So there's
It's so funny.
The Crown, Versailles, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, The Shining, Joker, and it's all grounded by the best lead performance I've seen by anyone in a really long time.
I was blown away by Kristen Stewart. And everyone had said she was good. Like I was expecting a good performance, and I was still blown away. Like she was so good in this.
And I didn't even know until afterwards, I think, that this was all written by the creator of Peaky Blinders, but it invokes that same family drama, psychological agony that Peaky Blinders does so well.
Yeah.
So if any of those things appeal to you, or like me, if all of those things appeal to you, go rent it on Amazon or iTunes or however you get movies for a couple bucks.
Did you just say iTunes?
You can get things through Apple. You can.
I don't think
do
it's called
rentals.
iTunes anymore.
And then
you flash
come back.
back to 2010 just now.
Yeah, pause.
I'm sorry.
Pause, do that, and come back.
Yeah, go back in time, rent it on iTunes, come back.
And I want to start a little bit expanding on The Crown because honestly, that's the only exposure to Princess Diana I've ever had. They introduced her in the last season as they got there kind of historically to her introduction. And I feel sympathetic for her. I really liked the way the actress portrayed her
she did a good
in
job.
that season of the show. But basically, that was my only framing for Princess Diana. I know she died.
Because she died... When did she die? In the 90s. I mean, this movie takes place in 91, and we were not born yet. So
right.
We were born in early 90s. So I really don't remember anything about her.
I feel like she
from my own life, I mean.
We have like a cultural memory of her, but I don't know the specifics, much of The Crown.
Yeah, it's like all I knew going in was I knew she had bulimia. I knew she was not liked very much by the royal family. I knew that her marriage with Charles sucked, and I knew that she was a good mom and that she was like this icon, and that's kind of it.
And this felt like a response to that because it's covering the same subject. I mean, at the same time, right? They're doing 2 seasons.
A response to The Crown, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're doing 2 seasons with Diana. The second one hasn't come out yet. So we're right, smack dab in the middle of that. And there have been drifts, I think, in The Crown in the past couple seasons where it does feel like it can sensationalize, glamorize, or excuse the royal family.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's not one frame of this movie that does that.
Yes, I think like The Crown is good at, it doesn't like idolize the royal family, like it shows how messed up they are in a lot of ways, but it still tries to justify it and be like, well, look how hard it is to be a royal. And like, yeah, but this movie instead like really challenges that and says, no, it's horrible. Like it's absolutely terrible. And here's why. Especially because when you frame it around Diana, she still was in pretty elite circles from what I understand, but she is an outsider coming into this royal family and like experience it having not grown up with it like the rest of them have. So she has that outsider perspective of like, this is awful. Why are we all like this?
Especially in the last season, I feel like there was a slight idolatry of Margaret Thatcher. And
slight.
I think the Queen has...
There was an incredible idolatry of Margaret Thatcher.
Like, the Queen was sympathetic in the first season because her father died and she wasn't ready for this position.
She's like 23. How old is she? She was very young. Mm-hmm.
But as we get on in the show, and I mean, what is it, 3 or 4 decades we've seen of her life now, she's kind of useless.
Oh, she's an absolutely useless idiot.
The show has to... I mean, like, the heroism of her suffering while she's, like, useless and so distant from her kids and her family. It's weird sometimes watching that show, how it like is trying to excuse or justify
right,
that.
because it shows you how bad it is, but it still is like, but it's fine.
And I'm not saying it would be wrong if you represented her the way I just described, but it feels like they're doing it feels like they're trying to put a spin on it and trying to be like respectful or kind or kind of zoom away.
They don't ever want to go too far and be too salacious and too disrespectful.
And anytime you sense that spin in a biopic, I think I'm turned off.
Because it doesn't feel honest.
Like the depiction of Diana's eating disorder in this movie, I think pretty much every element of royal life is presented flatly, factually, and painfully. Right. Even though it is fictionalized.
And there's so many surreal elements that obviously are not real. But
it doesn't feel like there's that same spin factor going on here. And I think that is the reason why I'm saying it's a reaction to the way The Crown is trying to, put lipstick on the pig. I think there's an amazing structural decision in the setup of this movie, which feels so intimate and compelling. And that is that they choose not to show all of the big events.
What kind of events? What do you mean?
The huge dinners and parades and like the set piece moments that would be the lead up in 2 episodes of The Crown.
Like we don't see them opening the presents, or we don't see... I'm sorry, what are you saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
95% of this movie is the preparation before the meal.
Yes.
The pep talk, and then the emotional carnage, the aftermath, and the recovery. It's not about the event itself.
Right. We only get one moment of a meal, and that's when she's having her own internal breakdown. And so we don't see the conversation. We see Charles say one awful, shitty thing to her, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, and we hardly see any of the royal family.
Yes.
We have one big scene with Charles, and then that other small one I just mentioned. And then you see Queen Elizabeth stare at her during that dinner, but she doesn't say anything.
And because
they have one brief conversation, but like that's it. You like don't see the royal family.
And because it's through a Christmas holiday, a lot of it is meals that you're gathering for. Those are the rituals and events I'm talking about. And you're right. The only one we see explicitly, we see Diana's hallucination through.
Right. Exactly.
We don't ever see the actual event.
No.
There's that surreal sort of escapism, which is so different from The Crown.
Right.
But also something like Succession, which is hitting so well right now. And I think every episode of Succession has a major event. Like if there's the family has a huge fight, no one's talking to each other. The next episode, even if it's weeks later, it is them with like a family group therapist.
Yeah.
It's always an event that brings them together, which is why they can have like a good Christmas episode or whatever. This exists purely on the margins and ignores those kind of signpost moments, which serves to differentiate it from, I mean, is there a topic more culturally obsessive than Diana?
Right, and it doesn't treat the members of the royal family like characters in an ensemble play. It is only about Diana and her relationship to the royal family, her position in it, and like the only people who are really characters, the only other ones are her kids, because her relationship with them is the only like real human relationships that she has is with those 2 kids. And so we don't really get to see each other character trying to be their own thing. Especially what I think is so cool is because this is based on real people, this is about Diana's perception. It's not about what Queen Elizabeth was really like, or even what Charles was really like, or about Margaret or any of them. It's just about how she sees all of it. So there's no interest in trying to get the actors to portray them accurately, or to try and like the way that they do in The Crown, which is interesting, and I like watching that. But this is doing something really different. Sometimes
The Crown blurs the line between acting and impressions.
You mean like Margaret Thatcher? I adore Gillian Anderson. I can't stand her performance in that season. It's horrific. Sorry. I think it's really bad.
And instead of that being what you're looking at it for, instead of historical accuracy being the kind of visual preoccupation of the movie, it's The Shining.
Exactly.
It's the over comparisons to The Shining. I wrote down a few of them just to kind of illustrate the point. There's a moment where Diana's at a bar and the bar is lit from below. Very much like Jack Torrance talking to Grady at the bar. It's like the only time that's ever been done. So your brain just recognizes it.
Yeah.
It's when she's in the bathroom, one of the times that she's vomiting, the garish, ugly colors in the bathroom are very much all the backroom parts of the Overlook. There are so many... I mean, as we transition through the days and the events and the change of time and almost... It feels like seasons sometimes. We see so many different periods of weather.
Yeah.
As we follow Diana, we get tons and tons of establishing shots of this mansion that they're in.
Yeah, felt so much like the Overlook, just the way that it pans across this huge building with it's like this symmetrical, like multi-windowed building. We both said watching it like that looks like the Overlook.
Absolutely.
And then going forward the entire time, I was like, this is just The Shining. It was so cool.
And there are those overhead looking down shots, that like bird's eye view shot of people driving, especially.
Diana,
that's kind of a classic Shining shot.
As she's approaching her Overlook, like as she's coming up to it.
And just the long tracking shots of her walking or running somewhere
through the house.
It's so uneasy and focused.
Yeah.
And I noticed as the movie goes on, I feel like the camera physically moves lower. It kind of sinks a little. Where there are parts where she's more panicked and more isolated, kind of running through the house, where it feels like half the movie could have been directed from Danny's tricycle.
Totally, yeah.
Following her in those long tracking shots.
And go ahead, sorry.
No.
Well, and also just there are other things I noticed too. Like there are a couple of moments where she opens her window to look outside the house, and it's really warm yellow, almost green light inside the house. When she opens the window, you get that really clear blue light that you only get from like natural light. And that's reminded me of when Jack is looking outside the window with his green turtleneck.
Absolutely.
That really, really bright, clear blue light. That was very striking for me. And then also when she's down in the fridge eating dessert, we said while we were watching, that's like Jack in the pantry.
Yes.
When he's trapped in there. And even when the moment when who she thinks is Maggie, the dresser, comes into the bathroom and hugs her, and then she looks in the mirror and it's not Maggie. That's like Jack when he's kissing the old woman in the bathroom in 237, and then he looks in there and it's a dead woman. Like just all of these moments. And I think even read somewhere that I don't remember seeing this, but there's a shot of two women dressed identically walking down the hall, like just all these little nods to like an iconically terrifying, unsettling movie, and it really makes you recontextualize and rethink Diana and her life.
And I feel like you notice the world changing around these characters because every time something horrible happens, they rush back to this one occupation that you see them in 100 times through the movie, and you notice how much they're deteriorating. For Jack, it's him in front of the typewriter, and you see him. He's got the dead eyes in a different outfit, or he's dragging an axe through the room.
Yeah.
With Diana, it's her getting ready for events. Yeah. It's her next to that rack of clothes, putting on the new necklace or the new whatever.
And as she unravels, she says, no, I'm going to wear a different outfit. I'm going to do what I want to do. Even though this is the breakfast outfit, I'm wearing it to lunch.
And because they're both so much the main characters, in that old school way where they're in every shot of the movie, that kind of main character thing, versus the new sort of ensemble trend we have for drama.
Right.
They are the isolated variable. We are spotlighting them and therefore their decline through every scene of this movie. And the comparisons to The Shining, I'm glad you had a bunch more examples because I think that helps illustrate the point. But it's so present throughout the film that for me, it developed an expectation that this movie would have the same ending as that one.
It's got to be explosive. Like something's got to go horribly wrong, because that's the sense you get. It's so tense, and the score is so tense and unsettling that you think something's going to unravel, something's going to go horribly wrong.
And I don't even mean the axe and the running through and the killing people.
Right.
I mean the shot of the photograph, the very, very end of the movie, where he's sort of trapped at the Overlook forever. Because so much of the movie is her feeling trapped. I mean, they sew the curtains shut.
They literally sew her curtain shut. I loved that. I thought it was so striking and just a really cool visual.
And I think that was maybe the most rewarding comparison to The Shining, is that sense of inevitability as you rush toward an ending that you're expecting, know that you have all these other echoes. It adds to the tension, the urgency, the need for Diana to escape before this thing that it seems like everyone in the audience is seeing coming, because you know what happens in The Shining.
Yeah.
Culturally, I feel like The Shining is one of those few movies that everyone knows.
Yeah, even if you haven't seen it for some reason, you know it.
We've talked about this before. The last movie everyone saw and can reference is Goodfellas. Nothing since then has permeated the culture on that level.
I like Titanic.
Yeah, do people make funny references to Titanic?
I'm saying everyone knows Titanic.
Everyone says they both could have fit on the door.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
That doesn't count.
Okay. I'm just everyone who's on a boat, every person who gets on a boat goes up to the front and puts their hands out. I'm just saying.
Okay, fine. Maybe.
Come on.
They're from the same decade. Fine.
Every little boy remembers the car scene.
Ooh. Which one came out later? No.
I think Titanic was 99.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Culturally,
so I win, you're welcome.
The Shining is a classic, and it is as entrenched in our lives as the royal family is. And I think it's a smart parallel.
Totally.
That almost makes the film more accessible globally.
I was going to say, how prevalent, I mean, The Shining is culturally prevalent in a global way, but I wonder how much it is how prevalent is it in the UK versus here? Because obviously the royal family and the crown, that's going to be much more seeped into British culture than American. So I kind of wonder how, I don't know if we can answer this question, but I wonder if that's an attempt to blend and to make it more global, or if it's like, yeah, The Shining is really popular here too, we'll just lean into
It's an interesting comparison, I think, putting The Shining almost on the same level as the royal family. For me, it helped anyway.
Yeah.
It gave me something else to
and the way
with.
we idolize the movie and idolize Kubrick, and there's similar things there.
And the other huge comparison for me was Peaky Blinders, because we're working with a Stephen Knight script, and he's written things that to me haven't felt like Peaky Blinders, which, of course he has range, but this very much did. Because there are ghosts and hauntings, there's metaphysical thoughts that overtake the protagonist's brain until they are physically interacting with their preoccupations, with a manifestation of whatever is dead and gone that they're missing. And here you have that with Anne Boleyn, but also, like you talked about earlier, with Maggie, who is I don't know what her title is.
I think she's a dresser.
Or
a lady's maid or something.
Yeah, and she's like fired and sent away pretty early on, and we realize she's Diana's only real friend here.
Yeah.
And then halfway through the movie, she seems to come back when Diana needs her most.
Yeah.
And there's this hard, jarring cut where you realize this person that Diana's embracing as she's all relieved isn't really Maggie.
Yeah. It's so sad.
She was sort of projecting that. Like she needed it, and she wanted it so badly she almost lived it for a second.
I liked all the ghosts throughout the movie, just with Anne Boleyn, and like you said, with Maggie and just her. And she has so many flashbacks, especially near the end. She kind of has this like montage moment where she looks back on all these different parts of her life, like her getting married to her when she was young and all of that. Just seeing all these things that are haunting her. Where was I going? I lost my train. Anyway, it was really good. I liked it. I was going to say, I liked that we didn't know what was real and what wasn't. Like the stuff with Maggie when she comes in the bathroom, and like the pearl scene where she's eating the pearls, because you totally could have believed that was really happening, the way that scene was laid out. And then, of course, you see that it didn't happen because she's wearing the pearls later. But the way that they do all of that and all of these nods to The Shining and just the overall unsettling feel, you get the sense that anything could happen, and I wouldn't have been surprised if at the end of the movie it's revealed that she's just alone in an abandoned house by herself.
Well, that was exactly the feeling I had, because maybe 3/4 of the way through the movie, after this false return of Maggie, she does really show up. And she has this glorious day with Diana where they're dancing at the beach, talking, driving away, and Maggie even professes her love for Diana, comes out of the closet. It's amazing. It's a great like breath of fresh air in the middle of all of this tension and hatred. And we've listened to some interviews and things, and they've said this is one of the more open inventions, this character.
Maggie, yeah.
Yeah. And
I think she's loosely based on some woman that worked in that house, but like it's that whole her being in love with Diana is completely fictional. A lot of that's made up.
And that kind of sparked something in me, and I have this little hunch.
Okay.
I think that Maggie's second return is also fake.
I could totally see that. Yeah, because I don't think anyone else sees her with Diana. Like, I think it's just her and Diana in those scenes.
And Diana easily escapes and drives away and has this time with her where she feels... I mean, she's caught by the police like 3 other times when she tries to go for a walk.
Yeah, how could she just drive away with Diana?
And I mean,
with Maggie.
Yes, the tragedy of this second return is that there's no break in the illusion. There's no tripwire hard cut edit to what's really happening.
Yeah.
Which suggests that Diana really is now losing her connection to reality. That her awareness of those breaks is fading as well.
Sure, yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's sort of the point of no return for her as a narrator.
Yeah. I think another element of this that we could think about as an invention of Diana's in her head is the butler character, Timothy Spall's character. I don't remember his name in the movie.
Whatever.
Well, some criticism I've heard of his character is that so he's completely made up as well, and that so in this movie he acts as the enforcer of all of the rules about being a royal, about like when you can and can't eat, you have to be weighed as you come in because it's a tradition about enjoying Christmas, and you have to wear the right thing, and well, you can't be walking around right now, and he is the one enforcing all of that. And the criticism I've heard is that, well, that was coming from all sides of the royal family. It wasn't just this one guy who gave all the rules. Like, it was the whole operation that's enforcing those rules. And I was thinking, well, if he's fictional anyway, it's possible that he's just her Grady. He's an invention of her imagination. He's the personalization of the pressure she's feeling from all sides.
Oh, yeah.
And even though none of the other, except Charles, none of the other characters tell her about the rules, like, you can still see it's coming from all sides. And so I think that, she has so many solo scenes with him that doesn't seem like something that would really happen in real life. I think that he could totally be an invention of hers as well.
Here, take a shot if you've heard me say this before. Diana is the Faustus.
Oh my God.
His character is sort of the Mephistopheles. Like, she signed
because
up
she
for
enters
this contract for what people think is like winning the lottery, marrying the prince into the royal family.
Wouldn't Charles be Mephistopheles then?
No. I think it's this guy because he's the one enforcing the rules.
But so does Charles.
He's the one who voices the fine print of the contract.
Yeah,
having to be presentable and attend all. I mean,
there's a part of it. Yeah, and there's a whole thing I learned that the reason that Diana, one of the reasons it would be so hard for Diana to just divorce Charles because their marriage was terrible. She was unhappy. He was openly cheating on her. A reason she couldn't just divorce Charles was because when you're royal, your children don't belong to you, they belong to the crown. And so if she divorced Charles, her parental rights would be almost non-existent. So it's a big reason why she was trapped and couldn't leave. So in many ways, you're right, she's like sold herself and she's trapped in this thing and can't get out.
And I think that's the big connection here between these characters who are possible inventions. Both the butler and I think more pointedly Maggie, because that escape she has, almost that she reaches that nirvana or that heavenly plane of getting away and just having a simple pastoral happy day. If that is fake with Maggie, I think that might be her test driving the escape that she makes with the sons at the end of the movie.
Oh, sure, because she does just take them. I think she doesn't sneak them out, but she announces, I'm leaving. Oh, she kind of forces it. That's right. She like interrupts their hunting session.
She does a heightened, much bolder version of what she does with Maggie.
Yeah, she walks in front of they're all shooting pheasants, and she like gets in the line of fire and says, I won't move until you let me take my kids out. And so they go and get KFC.
So yeah, that's my last point. Let me talk about that for a second. Okay. About the sons.
Yeah. So it was so good.
Yeah, this is the reason I wanted to cover this in an episode. The scenes with the sons are beacons through the movie. They're the anchors for Diana, these characters. And they're kind of like rare moments of hope and sanity amidst all of this like shining.
Yeah, because they're the only good thing she has.
Yeah. And they're the only moments where she willingly, openly addresses mental health, her dreams and desires and aspirations.
Yeah, because you can tell that she has a fairly especially for a British royal, she has a fairly open, that sounds funny, an open relationship with her kids, as in they freely talk about things. Like, especially William, he can tell, like, Mummy, what's wrong? Like, something's gone wrong, like, with the expectation that she'll tell him, but she holds back because it's Christmas and she can't tell him here. But there's an understanding that they freely talk to each other about
exactly.
things.
And that's the movie acknowledges that, and I think makes a statement about that relationship, maybe more efficiently and pointedly than I've ever really seen in a movie about a mother's relationship with her kids. She's still guarded and masked somewhat at all times when she's talking to them, because she knows she's talking to kids.
Yeah, so she's not talking to adults. She can't be fully open.
Right, you have, but also you just have to sort of speak their language and what they'll understand.
Yeah, and as a mom, you don't want to be too vulnerable for your kids. You still want to be, a strong figure for them.
She finds a way to be honest without being overwhelmingly vulnerable. She's loving, protective, passionate, eager to bond in every scene. And the movie acknowledges, I think, all of those levels of performance and mediation for who she's talking to and how she has to talk to them. When they have that conversation where they're all playing a game and they're talking in voices as these soldiers in the military.
It's so good.
And they're also opening up about their fears and futures. Who's going to be king? Are you happy? Are you okay? But doing it through this overt mediation that highlights how she always has to talk to them. It's so
and
efficient.
Keeping it, and that's just showing like a good, healthy way to talk about serious things, is doing it through a game or through a lens where you don't have to be fully vulnerable. Like the trick of talking to your kids about serious things in the car, so you don't have to look at each other, like that kind of thing. It's just showing her emotional intelligence as a parent, and also, like you're saying, the lenses and the filters through which these people have to talk about things.
And you're exaggerating it so much. You're making it so overt. Like the relationship with The Shining that the movie has. The film does this again in the climax, where it makes the crisis she's feeling about parenting and how she can struggle with Charles to be a controlling presence in her kids' lives to keep them from the horror show that they're doomed to in this awful family. The stakes are heightened. The imagery is made so overt, where the final interaction is her running into gunfire to keep her sons from mild discomfort.
Yeah.
And
it's so true.
All of her actions are desperate in an attempt to help her kids. I think she's weighed down. She's heavy with the weight of the world she's trying to protect them from, and the pressure she's under as this like one rebellious part of the royal family. I looked up this quote because I half remembered it and I wanted to get the actual wording. It was a Henry David Thoreau thing, that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Diana's desperation is not quiet.
No, not at all.
That's
why she was such a problem.
In the last scene of this movie, she is a grizzly bear standing over her young, surrounded by hunters. Literally screaming, roaring, like slashing for their lives.
Yeah.
She's the bear from The Revenant at the end of this movie. And yes, the direction, the writing, the editing, the cinematography, the colors, the music are all glorious in this movie. But Kristen Stewart is bringing something else to this movie, something intangible, like a subtle mothering ferocity that I don't think I've rarely seen anywhere outside my own mom.
Yeah.
Her performance is outstanding here. Yeah. If she doesn't win an Oscar, I'm never watching another movie. It's so good.
Absolutely. And that ending is like, what a wonderful, our neighbor's home, Mr. Delivery Truck.
Whatever.
It's such a wonderful antithesis to the ending of The Shining. At the end of The Shining is a man going fully insane and completely failing as a father and a husband by killing his own family or attempting to. He does not succeed, but he attempts to, and it leads to his own demise. And here it is a mother whose biggest achievement is motherhood and is trying not to fail in that role. She fails perhaps in her other roles, at least in other people's eyes, but she fiercely clings to that one thing. And even in the moment before the hunting scene where she gets her kids, in the other climax, I would say, in the house, when she almost throws herself down the stairs, Jack Torrance his madness, his descent is what leads to his death. That almost happens to her, and then she doesn't. And like the ghosts that surround her and her overlook actually hold her back. And so she doesn't do it. And so it flips that expectation. And yeah, it all does sort of explode at the end, but in a really, really different way. It's fascinating. It's so well done.
I mean, the execution on every level is fantastic here.
I have one more thing to say about the sons.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm exhausted just talking about this. Doing our notes, by the way, we listened to the score.
The score is so good. I should say the composer of the score is Johnny Greenwood, who is the lead guitarist of Radiohead. Funny enough, but he's done a bunch of scores. He did this one. He also did Phantom Thread, The Power of the Dog, You Were Never Really Here, a movie we loved. We Need to Talk About Kevin. He's done all kinds of stuff. The score is amazing.
It's a devastating score.
It's really unsettling and weird. Not quite as funky as the Shining score, but it's fantastic.
Well, again, it evokes the spirit, not the literal sound of it.
Yes, exactly.
It's unnerving without just being the same Kubrick synth as you see a big house.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. The last thing I'll talk about is William and Harry. I was doing just like the briefest background research on Diana because, again, I don't know a ton about her. Sorry, excuse me. I had an espresso before this and it's coming back. Anyway.
Does coffee make you burp?
Sometimes.
All right.
I'm a burpy gal. Okay. So... After Diana died, when they were planning her funeral, there was a whole debacle about public versus private funeral, etc. But something that stuck out to me was that the funeral committee who were helping plan really wanted William and Harry to like play big roles in the funeral, and Prince Philip, so Queen Elizabeth's husband, their grandfather, was very upset about this, and he said, "They've just lost their mother. You're talking about them as if they are commodities." And that was such an interesting and heartbreaking thing for him to have said. But it made me think of that conversation in the movie that Diana has with Elizabeth. Because it's the one time Elizabeth speaks in the whole movie. They're outside on the steps. And Elizabeth is talking about, they take lots of pictures of you, don't they? And Queen Elizabeth says, the only photograph that they take that really matters is the one they put in the 10-pound note. You understand, my dear, that all you are is currency. And I just thought, ugh, we both looked at each other. We were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like just such a brutal, it's so painful. And like, that's what she's trapped in, is all she is this commodity. She's currency. She's completely trapped in that. It doesn't matter how good a mom she is. It doesn't matter how good a princess she is. All it matters is that she's just this commodity for all of the UK to consume. All of the world to consume. It's so heartbreaking and awful.
And it's really one of those like golden Stephen Knight moments, because he puts such pressure on characterization. It's the focus of everything, even when there are Tommy guns going off and bottles of whiskey being broken over people's heads. In Peaky Blinders, it's always about family and relationships. And there will be these moments, just these one-liners, and they're not quippy. It's not Marvel movie stuff. It's one observation or like scathing critique that someone has chewed on for 20 years. And it's just this verbal uppercut. There were many of those in this movie.
I think I liked that one so much also because just the choice they made with the Queen, because they could have had her talk a bunch. They could have made her this huge villain character, and they didn't really. There's one moment where she's staring her down at the dinner when she's hallucinating about the pearls, and then there's this moment, and that's really it. And I liked her in that, Queen Elizabeth, in that scene, because she's not being mean. She's not being like, all you are is currency. You're useless. Like she's admitting that that's all she herself is too, and she's almost sympathetic to Diana. Not quite, but she's like, even if she herself as a person doesn't agree with that idea, that's completely irrelevant to the conversation. It's not about her feelings. It's about what the role she's supposed to fill. And she's just kind of saying, you have to suck it up and do that too. It was a really like delicate, complex moment that I think told us so much about Elizabeth and the royal family and just the monarchy in general. I thought it was a really, really good scene.
So if this movie's about the royal family, but it's not about the Queen, I would say, to make one more comparison to Faustus, Faustus is, as a play, it's about your soul being sold to the devil, but it's not about the devil. The Queen gets one scene in this movie. Lucifer gets one scene in Faustus.
Oh, interesting.
And he's not how you really expect him to be.
Nice. That's very cool.
So I think there's another comparison kind of worked.
I mean, this also just felt a lot like theater. It felt a lot because it was so intimate. This could have been a really, I mean, I don't know if this would work wonderfully as a play because there's a lot of stuff that's not dialogue. It's very much visual, but it still felt like a play in that way, just being so intimate.
No medium has better, more efficient or punishing dialogue than a play.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. It definitely felt like that for me.
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. Anyway, it was...
Yeah,
I was
fantastic.
blown away by it. Like, I knew this was good. I had seen so many good things, but I was like, it's a biopic of Diana. How good can that be? But, like, it's fascinating. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a biopic. No. It just feels like a tragic... Oh, I should say, one thing that I consumed about Diana also was Lena Norm's video about this movie. She compared this movie to the 2013 Naomi Watts Diana biopic. I think I've mentioned Lena Norm's before. Yeah. She's a YouTuber creator. Her videos are so good. She's so smart and is so insightful.
Oh yeah.
She's not just talking like she's not like other girls, but she's really not. I think she's so interesting and so good. We'll put a link in the description because you should look at her because she's great. But a lot of the stuff I learned about Diana was from that video. I didn't steal her theories, but she's great and I recommend you check her out.